Hello and welcome to the Thought Leader Recruiter podcast, where we dive into the mind shaping the recruitment industry. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer Tucker, Director and Executive Recruiter at MeeDerby. With over 36 years of experience, MeeDerby specializes in executive search within the staffing industry. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Can you give us a quick overview of what MeeDerby's core focus is?
Yeah, so we focus on placing professionals in the staffing and workforce solutions industries. So we call it the workforce solutions ecosystem. We work with a lot of traditional staffing firms. So we find their internal talent. That would include field sales, recruiters, area managers, branch managers, but we also work on their internal corporate positions, HR, CFOs, accounting, internal technology, things like that. And then we also have clients that are tied to workforce solutions. So platforms in our industry, employer of record, agent of record firms, MSPs. So everything tied to this human capital solution.
Okay, interesting. And what made you want to build a career in staffing?
Well, I think it was like most people, I just fell into it. I had no idea there was a staffing career to be had. And I came out of college and did not know what I wanted to do, which I think is a running theme in our industry. And I was interviewing to be a temporary associate at another staffing firm. And I was sitting across the desk from the recruiter. And I just kept looking at that person going, how do I do that? How do you do that? Like sitting and interviewing people all day just sounded so fun. Somebody found my resume on Monster about a year later and had a position in the industry. And I was very excited and took the job, not really even knowing what it was. I mean, I think we do that a lot in our industry. It just sounds cool. And so I took the job and I've been in it ever since. So that was in October of 2000. So it's been a long time and
Yeah,
it's been
well,
a great career. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But literally everyone I've asked that question say exactly the same thing. They just fell into it. Never
Yeah.
planned.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? Literally every person's brilliant. How do you position yourself differently from others in your niche?
So we actually, it's interesting. There are recruiters here in the US that focus on this. There absolutely are. We have a unique position because we believe we're the oldest and the largest doing what we do. So we've been in business for 37 years and we have a team of 13 and we cover the entire country and all verticals. So we work literally California to New York, and up and down. Our founder, Robin Mee, likes to say, if there's a job out there, there's a staffing firm that will fill it. So we have worked with traditional staffing firms that are, handling manufacturing, light industrial, accounting and finance, IT. But we've also had some really unique staffing firms that we've worked with, providing expert witnesses for trials and flight crews for private jets, really cool niche areas. So we work across all of those. So at the end of the day, it's really, we can fill and have filled very unique and specific jobs across industries in the staffing and workforce solutions area.
How do most of your new clients find you?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a combination. So we are very visible when it comes to speaking engagements, conferences. We do a lot of work with conferences. I think that we also have really grown our social media presence. So our social media manager, Jack, he does a fabulous job. He works on our LinkedIn following, our postings, how we appear. If a company Googles, how do I find somebody to work for my staffing firm? I think that we pull up fairly quickly. So that's probably one of the best ways that we get our new clients, but we also get a lot of referrals. So I think I would say probably 50-50 maybe now that I'm thinking about it. So a lot of referrals. And then we also turn, and this wouldn't necessarily be a new client per se, but we, I think, are very strong in turning our clients into our candidates. So we place a candidate who then becomes a client. And then sometimes they become a candidate again. And so really keeping those long-term relationships is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think most agencies are under leveraging content and personal brand?
Yes, I think small agencies are. I think the big ones have it down. But I think small agencies really do. I do agree with that. Yeah, I think that it's really important. I mean, if you think about the audience who's looking at social media, it's the workforce right now, right? It's new people coming into the workforce, and people like me that have been in it for a long time. I'm on my phone a lot, and so it's really important to have contact or content that will come up organically. And so, yeah, I think that I think smaller companies really need to focus on that. I just think that maybe they think it's not something that they need to do or invest in, but I think they do. I think they really do.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think content, personal brand is so important now for everyone because
Hmm.
it's such a crowded market, isn't it? And you're not going to stand out if you're keeping quiet and
Yeah.
not doing anything about it for sure. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
candidate wise, how do you help candidates stand out in that crowded market?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I am a big advocate for candidates having a recruiter work for them. I'm biased, of course, because this is our business, but I know the value of it. And so we do a couple things. First of all, we can get a candidate straight to the hiring manager. So a candidate is not applying to a LinkedIn ad or something on Indeed. They're getting straight to the hiring manager most of the time. But also, when we submit candidates, we submit them with information that's not on their resume. So it could be why they're looking, some of the impact that they've had in their organization. That's really, really important. We talk about compensation early and often. I think it's really important to be transparent when it comes to compensation. You don't want to get into the 11th hour of the discussion and find that you're playing different sports essentially. So, but really pulling that information that's important to the job and to the hiring manager and that initial presentation is something that I think that we're very, very good at. And that really does help those candidates stand out. But also it has to do with building trust with the hiring managers. And so when you have a hiring manager that you've developed a relationship with and they trust you, and they trust that you're going to send them candidates that could potentially be the best fit for them. Obviously, that's your goal. I think that goes a long way too. And so, because it's always my goal to have a hiring manager say, you know what, I trust you. This person looks good. I trust you. Let's set up a conversation. And then at that point, it's up to the candidate, to really sell themselves to the hiring manager. But when you develop that trust, that sets that candidate apart too. That kind of sets them aside. So I think it's all of those things together.
Yeah, absolutely. And do businesses need to rethink how they source candidates?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot of candidates in the market, frankly. You post a job, you're going to get a lot of applicants. And those applicants, most of them are not going to be qualified for the job that you have posted. So rethinking how you hire, absolutely. I mean, it can be through using a lot of technology tools, AI tools for screenings. But I'm going to go back to having the value of having a recruiter. My job is to look at the candidate pool all day, every day. It's my job to know who's on the market, where there's turn, where are companies maybe positioning to sell or having layoffs, or there's some unease. So there's movement in that organization. So and then I'm talking to people every day, all day, every day is what I do. Talk to these candidates. So um, companies, I think, sometimes are reluctant, even in our industry, to invest in hiring through recruiters, paying that fee. I often talk to a potential new client that the fee is a concern, and I get it. I mean, we're all budget conscious. But if you think about the time that you're saving going through 300 applicants that come in on a Friday night, which happens, having to talk to maybe 20 of them that are qualified, weeding those, the time that takes is enormous. And so the value that we bring in is absolutely, in my opinion, well worth the money. And so rethinking that, really investing in a recruiter in your field that specializes in your field can expedite that hiring process for you by so much.
Time's the most valuable thing, right? And you're taking out from everyone. So yeah, it's absolutely worth it. And what's
Yeah.
your current take on the talent shortage? Is it real or exaggerated?
So I'm laughing. It's that's a tough question to answer because it does depend on the field. And so we do, just by the nature of what we focus on, we do place a lot of sales focused individuals. So either individual contributors or player coaches or sales leaders. And I just had a conversation yesterday with a company. A good salesperson is still hard to find. They're very hard to find. Good salespeople, I mean, they still get affected by layoffs and reductions in force, but they're hard to find. And so I think that there is a shortage of good salespeople that want to continue selling. It's a grind. It's a grind. And so you need to reward them well. You need to have something that's enticing for them, and either a strong comp plan, which most salespeople are driven by making money. You want them to be driven by that, but also opportunities for growth. It could come in career growth. It could come in just honing their skills, getting better at what they do, but giving them something that entices them and then keeps them, what makes them want to stay. So, there's definitely a shortage in, certain technology areas. Absolutely. In healthcare, absolutely. We see numbers in locum tenens, for example, having double digit year over year growth in that industry. And so there's a shortage of doctors, but then also there that leads to a shortage of people that do do what we do, recruiting for the doctors and working with those physicians. And so, I mean, I think it's, yeah, I do think it's real, but I do also think it depends on the area that you're looking at, what that field is.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think businesses are not adapting fast enough to build these teams' modern skills?
I think it could be. Yeah, I think what it is though, really more than anything, it's training. I think it's tied more to training and trying to pull people into the industry that need the training because you are then creating the workforce. And so and I also understand that not every company is set up to do that. You have to have a really sophisticated and robust training and development program, and onboarding has to be very sophisticated in order to effectively do that. But again, that's one of those things that really pays off tenfold probably when you bring somebody into the industry and you can train them. And we see companies in our industry that do it and do it very, very well. There are companies that are known for hiring people right out of college, and they train them to be a recruiter. They train them how to go into sales, and they create that workforce instead of just hiring that ready-made person. Because honestly, the skills don't always translate. You may have somebody who's done really well, 10 years at a company maybe, and they may come to your company and not perform well. So it's not always a predictor of who's going to perform, but what is a predictor is how you onboard and train and develop that person. So there's definitely a direct relationship with that. And so I think more companies need to do that, but again, it's hard. You have to build that infrastructure around that. So it's not something that can happen overnight.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot goes into that for sure. And over in the UK, there's a big debate. I'm pretty sure it's pretty big in the US as well. It's the work from home versus the
Yeah.
in-office debate. What's your
Yeah.
view on that?
Oh gosh. I don't know. That's a tough one because, okay, so first of all, MeeDerby, we are a 100% remote company and we have been for many years. Myself personally, I have worked remote since 2000, and I have to think about this, 2005. And so it was before remote was a thing, and I mean, I didn't use Zoom and I didn't use the stuff. I was using my phone and, Google. That's about it. And so I can see for us, we have a remote workforce. And it works for us. Stay connected. We have, multiple meetings a week. We interact constantly. So I don't think anybody really feels like they're on an island. We have, high touch environment. However, having said that, going back to the companies that train and develop really, really well, really entry level candidates, I think being in office is critical. And so, I think about when I got into the industry in 2000, I learned by training, obviously hands-on training, but also by listening to the leaders around me, how they would phrase things to hiring managers, how they would talk to candidates, how they would negotiate offers. And I learned that by being in the same room with them. And that is the disadvantage of being entirely remote, is that you don't really get to hear that unless you're constantly shadowing, which I think isn't necessarily realistic. And so I think it depends on your structure, your infrastructure. People found during COVID very quickly how they feel about wearing remote. Some people loved it and some people literally hated it. Couldn't wait to get back to the office. So I think that that's important too, really honing in on you yourself have to determine, what environment you work best in. I think that most companies, a hybrid environment is really effective. So maybe 3 to 4 days in the office. 4 days may be better for training. 5 days in a week is tough. 5 days a week in the office is tough. There's something about having that one extra day working from home, which is really appealing for candidates. So yeah, but again, I just think it depends on your infrastructure and how you train and the level of candidate that you hire. And I really do think that if you're going to create that workforce and train and develop, you need those folks in the office.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You can see the argument for both sides. Like you said, it all depends on the individual. It all depends on
Hmm.
the company, like the infrastructure. What works for one's not going to work for another.
Right.
I think,
Right.
yeah, I think the hybrid model is obviously the most effective. I would have thought with
Mhm.
these companies. Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting one for sure.
It is. I don't know that there's like a right or wrong answer
No,
either.
there
I
is.
mean, it's, yeah, it just, I think there's a misnomer, especially before COVID. I think there was a misnomer about people who worked from home not really working hard. And I actually remember vividly. I would, when my kids were little, I would get them off the bus at 4 o'clock, like 4:05 every afternoon. And so I would work until I sometimes hanging up the phone at 4 o'clock so I could get to the bus and get them home, settle them, and then I would finish my day. And I remember twice parents at the bus stops or at the bus stop making a comment. One said something about me getting a real job, quote unquote, a real job. And then another one said something about, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I was kind of out of breath because I rushed up to the bus stop and she said something about, I didn't think you would have that much to do or something like that, something kind of indicating that I wasn't, again, working a real job. And so I think that stigma has passed, thank goodness, because, with COVID, everybody was working from home. But yeah, it's, a lot of times when you work from home, you put in more hours, it's harder to step away because you're not forced to leave your office, And so I do find that sometimes can be a little bit of a disadvantage. You're constantly working when you work from home. But yeah, it's up to the person. Some people really need to get out of the house and if you don't have dedicated workspace, it can be really stressful
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
try to
yeah.
balance everything.
There's lots of positives and negatives of both sides for sure.
Yeah.
What trends should job seekers be aware of right now? Is there anything that sticks out at the moment?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I don't know if this is a trend, but I think that companies are slow to make decisions right now. So I think that's something to be aware of. If you're just entering the job market, you may need to buckle up a little bit and kind of prepare for multiple interviews, for things to take a while to go through. I think that is one thing to be aware of. I do think that there is more of a trend using AI to screen candidates. And I think a lot of times candidates may not even know that they're being screened by AI, but I just think that that is something that's here and it's going to continue and get bigger and bigger. And so people in our industry, I think by and large are embracing that. But I do think that's something that candidates entering the market or that are in the market really need to know that that is something that companies will be doing. I put a little survey out on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago asking something about, if you were interviewing for, I think I put specifically an executive level job, would you go through a screening with an AI agent, something to that effect? And I was really more interested in the discussion that that would create. And by and large, people said, look, if it's going to help me get the job, then yes, I'm going to do it. Some people said no. And that's fine, but I think that the disadvantage will be if you don't go through that process, then you may exclude yourself from positions. So I think
Yeah,
that's probably the biggest one.
yeah, for sure. And if someone isn't getting interviews, where should they focus first? Is it resume? Is it outreach, networking?
That's a really good question. I think that if somebody, there's a couple things. If somebody's not getting interviews, they probably need to look at their resume. There are some things that are going to be hard for some candidates, I think, to change because some things you can't change. One is tenure. If you have a lot of turnover on your resume, that could be a big disadvantage to you. And so you can't change that, right? You don't want to lie on your resume either. But that could be the reality of having a lot of jobs over the past several years is that you could be passed over for candidates that have, just stronger tenure. There are more candidates in the market right now, by and large. So there's just more competition. So you have to look at it that way. But also, having said that, doing things to stand out, marketing yourself, we talked about your own brand, marketing yourself as a candidate too, making sure that your online presence is professional, meaning, look at your LinkedIn and make sure you're not engaging in things that aren't really focused professionally, right? Connecting with the right people, connecting with the right recruiters or talent acquisition managers. And don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. If you know a company is hiring and you can find the right hiring manager to reach out to them. But I also think be really cautious of people's time and respectful of people's time because there's a fine line, right? When you reach out to someone, there's a fine line when you are advocating for yourself, but also it can get annoying at the same time. So you just have to walk that fine line. And so I think it's good to put yourself out there, but don't necessarily demand, that the hiring manager call you. I think that's a turnoff.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so, but finding creative ways to get in front of the right person is something that you need to do if you're not getting the interviews.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Something like voice notes or video messaging, something like that. Maybe that could stand out as a way.
yeah, yeah. Linking in with them, sending them a note. Again, just wanted to connect and Yeah, I mean, I have had, I will definitely admit, I've had postings before and I've missed some really qualified candidates, but what made them stand out is that they sent me a private message. So it forced, and I mean that in a good way, forced me to look at them and say, oh, did I miss this? And I did. I actually had somebody that was placed with one of my candidates year before last. She had applied. I missed it. She sent me a private message. I looked at her background and she was a great fit and my client hired her. So I think things like that candidates should absolutely be doing.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is very important as well, though, isn't it? It's
Hmm.
almost like your second CV, or some people even
Yeah.
say it's even more important than your CV nowadays. It's
Hmm.
it's it's kind of an all-in-one thing, isn't it? It brings out it shows them your personality, it shows you your experience, it shows everything
Yeah.
really. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yep. Well, and having your LinkedIn match your resume is important because hiring managers will catch that very quickly. And so, yeah, so making sure that that aligns, making sure you have a professional picture. There is data that says that candidates that have a picture get a higher response rate. So having a professional picture. And I think your picture needs to be in line with your industry. I've seen really kind of fun pictures in like marketing and creative industries. If you're applying for a sales role, or if you're a sales professional, having something a little more buttoned up, I think is probably more appropriate. And so, so really thinking about those things too. Yeah, really the professionalism, no typos.
yeah.
You know, I
There's been many typos nowadays with AI.
yeah, right. I still see them. It's interesting. And I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I'm not perfect. And so, but it's just slowing down and getting eyes on it and making sure, that it looks professional.
Yeah. Talk
Yeah.
about AI. Did you use much of it in your work, and if so, how much?
So we don't use it a lot yet. We're small though. So we're small. So we're not weeding through, we're not placing hundreds of candidates or hundreds of contractors in positions every week. However, having said that, we do use it for some things. We use it to generate questions for positions that maybe are a little bit different than what we've had open. I love, using AI and things like Chat GPT for job descriptions. I don't like it for things like writing candidate bios. I am probably going to be the last person that I can think of that will use any kind of AI when it comes to presenting a candidate. I still feel really, really, really strongly that that should come from you, the recruiter. And so that'll be, I don't think I will ever use any kind of AI for that. But yeah, we're adopting it, kind of, exploring some different things. I can't say we use it super heavily right now, but it's definitely a big topic of conversation at MeeDerby.
Yeah. And what role do you think AI will play in the future of stuff, and how far do you think it's going to go?
That's a good question because it's a lot of talk about it. You talk to a recruiter, recruiters are going to say recruiters are here to stay. Of course, we say that, but I actually do think that. I do think recruiters are
Yeah.
here to stay. I think that AI will do things like pre-screen, look at resumes for us, so we're not clicking on resumes. Taking time to do that. I think that AI could possibly do reference checks. I would love that if AI agents would do all the reference checking. So, kind of the busy work. We think about some of that busy work that takes you away from talking to your candidates and negotiating on your candidate's behalf and developing those relationships. That's really the value of a recruiter. So, I think AI will do all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been interesting to see how what AI does in recruitment, because it's such a personable industry still, isn't it? So it's hard to see how far it'll go, but who knows what will happen in the next few years? We'll see.
I know Bill Gates was talking about just, I think last week, saying, I can't remember exactly what he said about the percentages, but basically like doctors and like all of these, critical positions, how much of that could go to AI. But at the end of the day, it's still the human touch is really, really important. And so jobs that require that, like doctors and recruiters, and not that we are saving lives at the same level, but we do change lives in our industry. And I think we're really critical to help people, in that journey in their career. So yeah, I can't see how an AI agent could take the place of that. So I hope it does it.
No, I think the job's safe.
Yeah, I hope so.
Final question. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about MeeDerby?
We have our website, which is just meederby.com. We are on LinkedIn. We've got our own LinkedIn page. Of course, my own personal LinkedIn. Those are probably our best places. So on our website, we have all of our postings that are not confidential, and we always direct our candidates to look at our postings because, we are human and we don't want to miss anything. And so, but it keeps the dialogue too with our candidates. I don't want a candidate to look at a posting and wonder why Jennifer Tucker hasn't called them. And so it keeps that human element active, and I can explain, the compensation isn't right, or whatever, whatever the reason is. And but then, yeah, we are very active on LinkedIn, and we like to post fun stuff too. We post things like we have a kind of a campaign where in the world is MeeDerby. So every time we travel, we post things. It could be a conference, but it could be a vacation. So I think that's fun. We post a lot of news that's happening in our industry. And so I think if anything, if you're a staffing industry professional following our page, you can see the trends, you can see the data, you can see announcements when people are promoted into great positions. That content is there on our LinkedIn page. So I think it's a really valuable place to be.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. Well, thanks, Jennifer. I really appreciate the chat today, and you can catch us next time on the Thought Leader Recruiter. Thank you, everyone.